Hello everyone, so in this video, let us talk about the fourth problem from the 30 days of JavaScript by LeetCode. So the problem name is counter 2. So to actually solve this problem of your own, just pause this video, don't see the solution part of it. But pause this video and first go through the second and the third problem I have posted on this particular video, that is counter 1. And the previous video of expect it to be or not to be, all that problem. You have to solve both of that problem because that will give you much of a clear gist to how solve this problem, because you can solve this problem if you have seen those two videos. So go check out that video first and then try to solve it by your own, or else you can watch the particular solution of it. So in this particular problem, let us go to the problem statement first. You have to write down a function create counter. It should accept an initial value or integer, that is int initial. It should return an object with three functions. So this create counter should accept an integer value. It should return an object with three functions. So this is a function which should return an object with three functions, and those three functions are increment, decrement, and reset. Increment will increment the current value by 1 and return it. So current value is this, like whatever is the initial value, it will increase the value of it and return the value. This will decrement, and this will reset it. Now the overall idea here is what is different at all. The overall thing here is that the create counter will be called once and it will initialize a counter with this value. Okay, now whenever you call increment, the counter value will be increment. These are function calls. So the function calls, when it is called, it will increment the value by 1. But where is this actual incremented value stored so that it will keep on incrementing, decrementing, and so on? Okay. In that scenario, there are multiple other ways you can make global variables and all of that. But the overall thing you have to learn in this particular example is closures. We had already made a video on closures, how you can understand that, how you can really imagine what closure is. Okay, you can watch a lot of videos online as well, but I just take one small example to understand closures. You can check out that video to understand closures more deeply. So if you understood closures, then this function will become easy, because you have to somehow store the state of what that particular counter variable is, so that you can increment it, decrement it, or reset it. So for that particular scenario, you have to use closures. Now, in simple terms, closure is just an encapsulation or like a collection of the variables and functions with its lexical scope. Okay, so that is the overall thing. Whenever this create counter is called with this initial value, it will create you can say a wrapper. In that wrapper, all these function calls and the variables will be stored and the state will be stored. So whenever increment and decrement will be called, the same state will be used to increment and decrement, and it will not create a new variable another time and so on. Okay, let's move down to the example code, and if you still have any doubts, you can mention down. I will move every line of the code one by one so that it will become more intuitive to you. So what you can see here is that this is the code. What we have done is that this create counter will return and store a function that you can see here, like how this overall piece of function will be called. You can see in the commented part below. What you can see here is that first we will call create counter with 5 as an initial value, and this is a function that will return, as you can see, it's a function that should return an object with 3 functions. So this, when called, will return an object with 3 functions and stored in the counter. Okay, this counter will be now storing a function. That function should return 3 functions. Okay, now what that function will be done, that function is actually encapsulating the variables and the different functions. That is what closure is. So what you can see here is that when this create counter is called, it will create this initial state variable. It will create these functions. As you can see, these functions, and this function is returned. So everything is encapsulated and returned to counter. Got it? That's a simple string. Now this initial state is initialized with this initial value. Okay. Now what happened in this overall scenario is that when you call, because this should return 3 functions, as you can see, increment, decrement, and reset, that is, and it should be returned in a object. So as you can see in an object, I will return 3 objects, 3 functions. So these are 3 functions. How you can see that? Because these 3 are equal to functions, as you can see. Okay. Now these 3 functions, as you can see, has a single role, that increment will increment the initial state value by 1. So as you can see now, I have taken the initial state value, increment it by 1, and then only return it. You cannot just like return it and plus 1. Like if you just try to do like this, I just remove this first. If you just try to remove this line and like return like this, plus 1, that is wrong. Though like this seems correct, but this is wrong. Why? Because you are not incrementing the initial state value. You are incrementing the return value. Whatever is returned from here. So what will happen is that if I create a counter with 5 value, it will return 6. It will return 6. That is fine because it is returning the initial state plus 1. It will return 6. But if you call increment one more time, it will still return 6. Why? Because you are not actually incrementing the initial state value. You are just incrementing the return value, not the initial state value. So whenever you return again and again, it will only return 6. Okay. But in this scenario, you are first incrementing the initial state. You are incrementing the initial state by 1 and then returning the new state. Okay. That is what increment, decrement, and the reset will like resetting it to the initial value again, as you can see. And that's the 3 function. You can just write it down here and then return this function. So nothing much complicated here itself. The only thing that you have to understand before, if you still have any doubts for this particular function, is understand closures, which I've already made a video just 2 videos back, and just go through the previous video of to be and not to be, in which I have created a function that is returning another function. So that is the overall idea of this particular program. If you still have any doubts, you can mention it in the comment box of this particular video. I will see you in the next one. Thank you, coding, and bye.